Hello and welcome. My name is Njenga Hakeenah, and in Africa, the donkey story is not just an animal story, but it is intertwined with climate change, resilience, adaptation and livelihoods, women's rights and empowerment, as well as the African people's survival. In China, the donkey is a source of beauty and youth and big business, largely. The contrast is that in Africa, the donkey is worth more alive, while in China, it is much more valuable dead, driven by the demand for health and beauty products enriched with argile, a gelatin made by boiling donkey hides. On February 18th, an announcement that would reverberate across African countries and most of China was made during the 37th Ordinary Session of the African Union Assembly when heads of state met in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. The meeting was to ratify a number of motions, including the donkey skin trade ban. More than half of the over 1.3 million donkey hides China imported last year came from AU member countries, showing the urgent need for laws to protect the hardy animals from extinction. After the ban, I spoke with Jude Riziki, who works with the Kenya Network for Dissemination of Agricultural Technologies, KENDAT, to curb donkey poaching in East Africa. All right, and I know that KENDAT in Kenya has, in fact, you have been for a long time being referred to as the donkey people, and you have been in the processes of policy making in terms of protecting our donkeys. And we have seen the reduction in numbers. We have seen the slaughter that has been going on as late as, last year, towards the end of last year. From where you sit and from where you have been in terms of policy making, in terms of protecting the donkeys, where and how will Kenya implement this?
First and foremost, what we've done in the last few months, there have been a very large amount of donkey slaughter in the bush because the government already banned the abattoirs. So these people are going to the bush to slaughter these animals. So some used to be bought, others were stolen. But now we work with the enforcement agencies, the police, the chiefs, to make sure that we are also giving them an opportunity to understand that this is a vice, that this is against the animal welfare of the donkey. So it is also against the CAP 360, but we came to realize that the law on CAP 360 is a little bit lenient on the perpetrators of donkey hide trade. So we encouraged the enforcement to use the penal code. So that is what has worked in Embu County, in Kiambu County, and the cases have reduced in the recent few weeks. We can say it's a little win for us, yeah.
And when you say capital, the penal code, that means that the crime or whatever is happening with those who are poaching donkeys and slaughtering them for whatever reasons are treated as, criminals. And this is a capital offense, right?
Yes. That is what I mean, because when we tell the enforcement agency to use the penal code, they go and charge these people with, is this the right way to carry the meat? Now the Meat Act comes into place. Is this the right vehicle to carry the meat? The Transportation Act or something like that comes into place. All these things into one to just frustrate their business so that they cannot continue doing it, in terms of seeing the CAP 360 as a lenient part of the law, but the penal code is more harsher.
And if I may ask, because I don't have the numbers, and probably you have them, how far have we come in terms of probably the donkey population's increase? Because I know that towards 2016, we had about 1 million donkeys. Have they increased or have they decreased? And could this poaching have contributed to that?
Yes, the donkey population has decreased because of the bush slaughter. According to the current census for the animals, the population was about 1.6, but when the slaughter was initial, and when the slaughter was actually active in the abattoirs, we lost around 1.2 donkeys to slaughter. So the numbers of donkeys has really decreased, and it could get to extinction if this was not done by the AU, because the donkeys don't really reproduce like cows and goats. They have to be really stress-free to reproduce. So these are not animals that you can put in a herd or put in an enclosement for production. They are not production animals, they are draft animals. So the moment they are confined in a place so that they can reproduce, the stress levels go up so they don't reproduce. So that is a research that was done by the Donkey Sanctuary. And now that came up with the solution of just frustrating the donkey slaughter, the hide trade, because the donkey slaughter was already banned in Kenya.
You have mentioned the reduction, and in terms of now what the AU has said and proposed that countries do, or passed and made it a ban, from your perspective, where you sit as a policymaker in terms of protecting the donkeys, how do you see your participation and involvement in enforcing this even further to ensure that we protect our donkey populations?
KENDAT works closely with Brook East Africa, who are our donors with the Donkey Project. So Brook East Africa works really closely with the government in terms of advocacy and policy making. So that will be a great avenue for us to champion for the ban to even be implemented by the government in Kenya. And that is going to be a very good start for Kenya, especially with Brook East Africa as the champions of this.
When it comes to some of these cases, happening and increasing and growing, we know that corruption plays a big role in that we know who is doing this, but we won't arrest them because, hey, somebody is getting a kickback somewhere. These cases that you have in court, you cannot talk about them, but you can speak generally about the trade because it is illegal largely. How much and how big a role does corruption play in enabling these illegal trade to happen?
There was a loophole where that the donkey slaughter was banned, but the donkey skin trade was not banned. So what AU has done is ban the skin trade, which will now frustrate these people, these cartels who are doing this for trade, because these skins are actually taken overseas for some medicinal values that are not backed up by data. They are just rumors. So it has made the donkey population in this continent and in this country go down really fast. So there are people, yes, that frustrate the operations, but in any government, I think that is something that we see every day, right?
All right, and probably there is somebody who is wondering why is this important? Donkeys, what do they do? Why are they important? Maybe you can just tell us why donkeys are important and critical to the African landscape, especially for the smallholder farmers.
Yes, donkeys are very, very important in the livelihoods of those people who use it, especially in the ASAL areas. So these people use their donkeys to fetch water for commercial purposes, for home use. They use to transport building materials, fetch firewood. So they use them for both home use and commercial purposes to get their day go by and fend for their families. So when a donkey is stolen from such a farmer, they are just crippled.
Thank you very much, Riziki, once again, for allowing us to have this time with you and for your insights. And again, we are grateful. We look forward to taking this conversation forward.
Thank you so much for having me. I really do appreciate it. Thank you.
The move by the EU is a major boost to the efforts against donkey poaching, which stakeholders say threatens the existence of the animals and families that rely on them. This 15-year ban on the donkey skin trade could go a long way in protecting African donkeys, but there is no timeline or mandate that requires African countries to implement the new regulation. I also spoke with Adam Alqali, president of the African Youth Business Council, which works closely with the AU trade departments, including the African Continental Free Trade Area, otherwise known as AfCFTA. And the interesting bit is that you sit on this council as the president, and you are allied to the African Union. And so anything regarding trade touches you. And this is why we have you here. So probably what we can start with is, when it comes to implementation of such a ban across the 50 plus countries, which are 54 so far, African countries, how do you see that happening, Adam?
So I would like to begin by saying that the ban is an important move by the apex continental governance body, the African Union, to see to it that the declining population of donkeys on the continent, as a result of their poaching, and exportation to particularly China, has been put to stop. This is a result of a series of advocacies that have been on for many years, particularly led by international animal, or rather to specific donkey rights organization. So it's a big deal that we had this ban, taken at the 37th ordinary session of the Assembly of the African Union Heads of State and Government, which took place in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, between the 17th and 18th of February. However, like many other beautiful policies, of the African Union, this ban too will only become a reality if member states of the African Union, I mean the 55 countries that constitute the African Union, have take it upon themselves to go back to their countries and domesticate this ban, and create local laws that will allow them to implement the ban. Otherwise, the ban will just go the way of many other beautiful policies of the African Union, which have not, to a large extent, received the right attention from member states. So I don't expect this to be different. Like I said, there are many other beautiful policies of the African Union which will go a long way in changing the lives of the citizens of the continent if it had been implemented, but which unfortunately had not been domesticated and implemented by member states. So this too will not be an exception. I would just hope that member states see the need to put an end to this unfortunate exportation of donkeys for their skin, China, by various interest groups.
And you have mentioned, because I am also not very optimistic when it comes to implementing these laws, because locally in Kenya, where I am from, we have a lot of donkeys. As of 2016, we had a population that was estimated at 1.6 million. And by the end of 2022, this population had fallen because of the abattoirs that had been licensed for the slaughter of donkeys. And so what happens is that we have the laws, but they have not been fully implemented. And also there are other factors which we'll discuss a bit later on. But from where you sit, and you are at the AU meeting, from where you sit, how do you see this going? Do you see any kind of hope? Because it's a big thing. Many Africans, especially in Ethiopia, where you are hosted, they depend a lot on donkeys. Do you think it's going to be something that is going to be easy to implement across the continent?
So like I said earlier, the implementation will entirely depend on the member states. When heads of states go to these high-level meetings and summits in Addis Ababa or anywhere else around the continent to take decisions, those decisions, are not going to be implemented by the African Union itself. They are going to be meant to be implemented by the member states. So the onus lies on the determination of the member states of the African Union, like Ethiopia, like you said, like Kenya, to see to it that this decision has been implemented. The case of Kenya is very interesting because, like you said, Kenya has got dedicated slaughterhouses for donkeys, which I don't think exist everywhere on the continent. And another thing is that Kenya had even established a law in 2020 to ban the slaughter of donkeys for the purpose of exporting their skin. However, what happened eventually, the business groups who are interested in this eventually went to court and got that ban to be uplifted. As it is now, those who are involved in the trade can continue to do this trade because there's a court decision that said they can continue to do it. So what we need, I think, ultimately is for people, especially those who are affected by this by donkeys. Donkey, across rural Africa is a very important animal. It's a source of livelihood. Many families depend on their donkeys for sustenance, for their livelihood. So if we wake up one day and realize they are all gone to poaching, then it's not going to augur well for our communities. It's going to have an adverse effect on our societies. So it's up to the citizens of the African countries to particularly those who benefit from the donkey economy, to sit up, form as donkeys associations, to serve as lobby groups, and work in conjunction with international animal rights groups like the Donkey Conservatory, like Brook, to see that there are laws, the right necessary laws have been established. Now we have a basis because the decision of the African Union, whenever they take decision at that level, what it does is it empowers member states to go back to their countries and domesticate it. So this could be an important basis for pressure groups, for civil society organizations interested in the donkey economy to push for the domestication, for the creation of laws across the member states, particularly in those where donkeys are big deal, like Ethiopia, like you said, like in Nigeria, donkey is a big deal, in Kenya is a big deal, so that ultimately we can make sense, to this ban. Otherwise, this ban will just be a mere ban and nothing is going to happen.
And that's the sad reality, because the other issue that we are going to discuss is the big money that is in the illegal business of, donkey skin trade. And I want to speak about corruption because corruption seems to be Africa's Achilles heel. We have everything else going for us, but corruption tends to undo every other single gain that we make. So when it comes to the trade ban, because no business will happen with any country outside of Africa without the authorization or without the knowledge of the host government. And so how big do you think corruption will play a role in either making this work or hindering it?
Like you said, corruption is our Achilles heel on the continent, and the fact that we have not been able to achieve significant development milestones could largely be blamed to corruption. And this is the case of the donkey ban is not going to be an exception. Even if we member states go ahead and establish these laws, if there's no effort to stop the poaching and the exploitation of donkeys for the purpose of using their skin, as for medicinal purposes in China, this will continue to happen. The challenge is that on the continent, in countries for example, let's look at the case of rhinos and elephants. In countries with huge population of these animals that are now, on the threat of becoming, extinct. There are efforts, of course, you can see there are efforts by wildlife conservatory on this continent. There are task forces, established purposely to checkmate the activities of poachers. However, this will continue to happen. Why? Because of corruption. So I don't think this corruption, if it is not checked, will ultimately allow this to work. Even when member states go back and domesticate this ban and create local laws to implement. So what we must see is a commitment from people in government. But like I said earlier, not just people in government, but people who are affected by the donkey, whose source of livelihood revolves around donkey, to work along with international animal rights organizations to ensure that this ban has not gone the way of other decisions of the African Union, by ensuring that corruption did not come in to ensure to prevent the implementation of the ban by member states. So, like you said, corruption is a serious issue for us, and it has been the major factor militating against our development. Therefore, if this ban must work, member states of the African Union must not just commit to domesticating and implementing this agreement, but commit to ensuring that perhaps we have task forces, that are committed to ending this illegal business.
All right, and you have jumped ahead of this conversation, because my other question was, when we all ganged up against the poaching of ivory, rhino horns, and other wildlife, China did play a huge role in kind of limiting that kind of business. But I don't see the same happening with the donkeys and with ijao, which is the product that comes from the donkey skin. And just like the same is happening in African countries and with African governments, it seems like there will be no one stopping this until it's time. But do you think it is possible? Because when an elephant is poached, or when we kill a rhino, or a pangolin for its scales, rarely will individual families be affected. But when somebody kills a donkey, then that could mean the end of a livelihood for a whole family. And so, do you see any urgency in African governments working with their Chinese counterparts to ensure that this, could be the same way like they did with the ivory and other wildlife trafficking?
Indeed, the analogy you gave is very important. Whereas elephants and rhinos are more or less, we can describe them as wild animals. Donkeys are domestic animals. They live with people in their homes, in their communities, and they like you see the role they play in families, whose livelihood depend on donkeys, is so enormous, is so big, is so important. Therefore, like you said, whereas the ban, when we try to prevent poaching of rhino horns, we do it for the sake of ensuring that these animals do not go extinct, for preservation. But in the case of donkey, it's about sustaining, livelihood of human beings. So this is more important, and this is why member states of the African Union must take this ban with all seriousness and ensure that they give it power, they give it life. Because, like I said, the AU creates these policies, these frameworks, these bans to guide me, help provide a context for member states to also go back and create laws, in their respective domains to bring life to the ban. And in doing this, we need member states of the African Union to work with China. Yes, like you said, because you can't stop it if you keep trying to work with those who deal with those who are engaged in the trade at the source. You must go to the destination where it goes and ensure that there is no demand for it in the destination. Because as long as there is demand in the destination, the people will continue to try to go against those laws, use illegal routes to export it to China. So China has a very crucial role to play in this, and I hope African Union will, in this regard, provide some leadership to see that because that is its role, and the good thing is that the African Union has got. In Beijing, the ambassadors of all the African countries have got a group where they meet and discuss, policies of importance, to their respective countries in relation to China. So perhaps we would want to see, the African Union, perhaps working with the group of ambassadors of African countries based in Beijing, taking this up with the Chinese government to ensure that, there's all support and cooperation from the Chinese government to ensure that there is no continuous demand for the skin of donkeys in China, which will ultimately help in stopping the illegal trade and exportation of the skin from Africa.
And I just want to follow that up and ask, do you see that happening? I know you may have mentioned it, but do you see that happening anytime?
Yes, because why? Because donkeys, like you said, are not like elephants. They're not like rhinos. They are a source of livelihood for hundreds of families, across all countries of the African Union, if not all, many, I would say. Therefore, because of the impact that the extinction of donkeys will have on rural livelihood on the continent, I feel perhaps we might see a different attitude towards this ban. And if you look at the efforts to stop the poaching of rhinos, and the horns of elephants, you can say in a way we have succeeded, because there are ongoing efforts in all countries where we have these populations of these animals to checkmate their poaching, even though it still continues to happen. But you can see there's an ongoing effort to stop that, and I believe this ban might ultimately, be like a wake-up call for member states to now begin to do something about the ban. And and leading to this ban, before this ban, there were a series of advocacies and conferences, including with African ministers, of agriculture or animals resources or what have you. And it was in one of such conferences in Dar es Salaam in 2022 that led to this decision, because decisions at the African Union begin at the lower level, the level of what they call the SCC, Specialized Technical Committees, and then it comes to the level of the ambassadors or ministers before it gets ultimately to the heads of state to make decisions. So I would like to say I'm optimistic, because this thing didn't originate from nowhere. It comes, there's a whole lot of movement, to ensure that the poaching and exportation of donkey skin is stopped, and I will hope to see that international animal rights organizations like the Donkey Conservatory and Brood coming in to play a very key role across the continent to help, like they did in Kenya, organize people whose livelihood depend on donkeys to form associations that will serve as pressure and lobby, platforms to lobby members of the legislators across the continent to ensure that they do what is right in terms of creating local laws to back this ban at member states level, and ultimately ensure that the necessary, even if it is task forces are established to implement the laws.
And just to issue a disclaimer, it doesn't mean that because I have compared, the poaching of elephants and rhinos to be lesser evils, but it is to just bring into, perspective what an effect, taking a donkey from a household has on a family or even a community, much more than what we do and what we see in wildlife. Yet there is so much outrage when we see, elephants and other wildlife have been poached, they have been killed, they have been slaughtered. And I would just desire to see the same outrage for when it comes to, the donkey poaching and all these things. And the demand for Ijao has contributed to the collapse of the donkey population in China. And can you imagine a country with 4 billion people having, decimated their donkey population? And Africa, we are 200 million people less than China. So you can imagine what an effect that would have on the African smallholder farmer who relies on the donkey for fetching water, for plowing, for moving things, for taking stuff to the market, and things like that. Thank you so much, Adam. It's been a really interesting conversation that we've had. Maybe it's you and I, but a lot of faith is needed. But the government have to also do they have to play their role and do their bit to ensure that we have the faith in our governments to do the best for us, and not just for some privileged few who are enabling this to happen. And so my parting shot is that until the Chinese government stops the trade, just like it did with ivory, until African countries come to the table and tell China, no, you have to stop this leakage in your country if we are to continue doing business, then we still have a long way to go. Because until and unless there's a stoppage of the demand, in terms of where this agile is in high demand in China, then we will continue seeing this poaching going on, and we have to stop it. We have to stop it. It has to be stopped. And so, Adam, what I know is, and this is not in protection of the Chinese consumer, but it's just the same way that you would go to the shop and buy your favorite coffee. It is the same way you would go to the shop and buy your favorite balm, or whatever kind of beauty product. And so most of these people may not understand how this agile comes to be. They may not understand what it is made from, because it is on the package, and so they are getting used. I mean, they have grown accessing shops, and so unless we do a lot of civic education, a lot of push, even for the stakeholders in the donkey sector, to say that we need to inform people, they need to know what this is doing to the African communities, then the demand will continue. And so we have to find a plug for that demand by offering education, by ensuring that these stakeholders are participating in events where the Chinese government is at the table and being told that this is what is happening to our families and to our communities. Thank you so much.
Based on these conversations, there is an urgency to protect the African donkey population from poachers. In 2016, for instance, Kenya licensed 4 abattoirs that had a capacity of slaughtering 1,200 donkeys daily. If this was sustained, the country's donkey population of 1.8 million then would be decimated in less than 5 years. While China relies on donkey skin imports, there is no reliable data on how many hides are imported from Africa and other countries in different parts of the world. The AU ban is a step in the right direction, but it can only make sense if it is implemented by member countries. These will also help regularize the trade in any donkey products, while also ensuring the sustainability of these animals. For more insights on what is happening with China in the Global South, please follow us at China Global South Project across all social media platforms that you're on, and also visit our website www.chinaglobalsouthproject.com. Here, you will get fresh stories every day, and you can even go back in time for all the China-Africa relation pieces curated with more than 15 years of experience by the China Global South Project team. As always, we are privileged to have you. See you again soon.